Is this one continent or two? And what do you call this? Well, that depends on where you're from, and this is the kind of thing that can make my life really difficult when I'm trying to speak to an international audience. So let me just briefly talk about some of the unexpected cultural differences that I have to deal with. And I have to deal with them here on my YouTube channel because I'm speaking to a lot of native German speakers and a lot of people who speak different varieties of English. My native language is British English, and for the most part, that's the language that I speak in my videos. I say for the most part, sometimes I have to make a few concessions in the interests of efficient communication. More on that later. But the most obvious sign of this is in my vocabulary captions, where you might see something like this, or even something like this. The slight problem that remains, though, is that there are many varieties of English and I'm restricting myself to only two of them. So I am sorry, all you South Africans and Australians, New Zealanders, Canadians, Indians, and so on. But there is a limit to what I can do. Similarly, there are many different varieties of German. So if I were to be even more inclusive, I could write captions like this one, or this one, or maybe even this one. But since this channel is about Germany specifically, I hope you'll forgive me for sticking to standard German. But sometimes things are not even that simple. For example, take a look at this. Now, you all know what it is, but where would you say the pavement is? If you speak American English, you probably say that this is the pavement. But if British English is your language, then you're more likely to say that it's this part here. Which means that if in a video I say that, for example, it is illegal to ride a bike on the pavement unless there's a designated cycle path there, some of you are going to get entirely the wrong idea. If I happen to have a caption, then that will at least clarify my point, but not everybody is going to read that caption. So I have to try to find alternatives that will be generally understood, which is usually possible, although sometimes a bit tricky. And so I will usually talk about footpaths and roadways. It's not a perfect solution, but it does give you the best chance of understanding me correctly. Sometimes, though, this technique can stir up a little controversy, as exemplified by the name of this sport. Because in my videos, I usually call it soccer. And for some Brits, this is nothing short of blasphemous. We're not Americans, we call it football. And that mystified me the first time I got these comments on a video because, in fact, the word soccer was coined in England, and Brits of my generation never had any problem using it. Okay, this isn't really what my channel is about, but it is quite fascinating. The word originates in English public school slang, and by public school, I of course mean what Americans would call private school. Yes, there's another one. You begin with a word or a name, like for example, the name Rodney. Take the first stressed syllable, which in this case is Rod. To that, you simply add the suffix er or ers to make, in this case, Rodders. You may have to make a couple of other minor adjustments, but that's basically it. And so, legendary sports journalist and commentator Henry Blofeld is sometimes called Blowers, and entertainer Keith Chegwin once had a children's quiz show called Cheggers Plays Pop. By the same process, the sport of rugby football is sometimes called rugger. And by now you've probably realized that the word soccer is constructed in a very similar way. But what word was it derived from? Well, the full name of the sport that it refers to is association football. Take the first stressed syllable and add er to it. That gives you soccer. And that is how the sport is internationally known. The problem with the word football is that it doesn't refer to one single sport, but to a number of related but slightly different team games played with a ball and on foot, that is, without a horse. It has nothing to do with kicking a ball. So you can have association football, rugby football, American football, Gaelic football, Australian rules football, and so on and so on and so on. Which of these is the most popular will vary from country to country. And if I just say football, you're most likely to interpret that as meaning the type of football that is most dominant in your country. And that might be the wrong one. And so I specifically refer to soccer, and to me that is absolutely fine. The idea that only Americans use that word is very new. Back when I was young, we used the words football and soccer interchangeably to refer to the same sport, and no one ever commented on that. Here, for example, is an article in a British children's comic ostensibly written by the fictional character Roy Race, better known as Roy of the Rovers. And here is a British newspaper headline from 1998. Both of these are about a problem that was rife in the 80s and 90s and which in Britain could be called football hooliganism or soccer hooliganism. So no, soccer is not an Americanism, and I am not a traitor to my country for using it. But let's go back to the first question I asked in this video and change the subject from team sports to continents. How many continents do you see here? If you're British or American, you probably see 2. If you're German, you probably see 1. It all comes down to how you define what a continent is, and that's actually surprisingly difficult to do. Depending on what you were taught at school, you would put the total number of continents in the world at either 4, 5, 6, or 7. Generally speaking, Germans view this as one continent which they call Amerika, and which can be subdivided into North America and Südamerika. But like most Brits, I was taught that North America and South America are 2 continents connected by a land bridge. If you want to refer to the entire landmass, you have to say the Americas. And this is where that sometimes matters for this channel. In German, Amerika is a huge continent, but in English, America is shorthand for the United States of America, which means that to me, an American is a US citizen, but a German might tell me that that word is ambiguous. Of course, colloquially, the German Amerikaner can refer to somebody from the United States, but technically it can refer to anyone from North America or South America. In order to be more precise, Germans might say US-Amerikaner. It sometimes happens that when I refer in English to Americans in a video, a German will comment to say that this is incorrect. I should say US Americans. But if I say that, then an English speaker will comment to say that that just sounds dumb. Do I call myself a UK Brit? So in my videos, I will continue to talk about soccer and about Americans. But at least now you know why. Those of you who've been following my recent community posts will know that I'm dealing with an injured cat at the moment. Now, she's doing fine, but it's also the reason why my next travel video has been delayed. For now, though, here's an old one that you might enjoy.